Welcome back, life science learners. Let's continue with our lesson. A recap of what we're doing. Today we're focusing on homeostasis. In our lesson, we're going to focus now on some disorders such as diabetes. We'll also look at some other nutritional disorders and how they affect individuals. Let's get straight into the lesson, have an overview of some basic concepts around the regulation of blood sugar levels, and then we will unpack what diabetes mellitus is. Let's recap what homeostasis is. And homeostasis, again, simply put, is maintaining a constant internal environment. The context of this is important because when we unpack nutritional disorders, we find that one of the biggest challenges we find with maintaining your diet is maintaining a blood sugar level within the norm. So many individuals struggle to do this, and we find that that results in certain nutritional disorders such as diabetes. So we're going to look at what happens to the mechanism and how that results in conditions such as diabetes mellitus. Okay? The concept of negative feedback, again, it's important for us to recognize that negative feedback refers to processes in the body that respond in an opposite manner to a change. I'll say that again. Negative is an opposite, feedback is a response, and mechanism is a process. So if we put that together, it essentially points to processes in the body that respond in an opposite manner to bring about homeostasis. And essentially this is what maintains the blood sugar levels within the body within a normal level. And we find that this process of negative feedback mechanism is fundamental to many other processes in the body. Today we talk about blood glucose, and blood glucose essentially refers to the level of glucose in the blood, and that often is measured depending on when an individual has had a meal and the level of glucose in their body after a specific meal. Okay. Finally, we're going to look at the two hormones that are important in regulating blood sugar levels, and these hormones are insulin and glucagon. And remember that these are produced by the pancreas, which is an endocrine gland. Finally, we talk about a complex glucose molecule or carbohydrate in which the glucose is stored as glycogen. And so we find that when the blood sugar levels are high, with the assistance of the hormone insulin, the glucose is stored and converted into a complex form called glycogen. And this is essentially the reserve glucose that the body relies on when the blood sugar levels fall below the norm. And so it's important that we equip ourselves with these terms. Let's look at what happens when an individual is not able to control their blood sugar level. And guys, it's a disorder that is common to many South Africans. We around the world, we know that many individuals are affected by a condition called diabetes mellitus. Let's try and unpack the word diabetes and mellitus. Essentially, the word diabetes refers to the production of large amounts of fluid, such as urine. So individuals that are affected by diabetes produce large volumes of urine. The word mellitus points to sugary or syrupy. So let's put that together. So it's urine that is syrupy or sweet or honey-like. And that's because individuals that are diabetic tend to frequently pass out urine that gets rid of the excess glucose in the body. So that is essentially what diabetes mellitus is. So we'll unpack that as a disorder which is as a result of the body's inability to control blood sugar levels. Right. So diabetes is a disorder characterized by high blood sugar levels or high blood glucose levels, resulting in increased fatigue, dehydration, and a lack of energy. Let's try and unpack that. So if you know of a family member or relative, or you yourself are affected by diabetes, you will notice that the symptoms of fatigue set in. Fatigue essentially is because the blood glucose is present in the bloodstream and does not get into the cells, because Insulin is not able to allow for the glucose to be absorbed into the cells to be used for cellular respiration. So lots of that glucose remains in the bloodstream, and then it's filtered out and released as urine. So the energy that we would get from the glucose is not used but passed out in urine. And that's the reason why individuals that have diabetes are generally very tired or experience extreme fatigue. It's because they cannot absorb that glucose and use it by the muscle cells to produce ATP. A second symptom is that they experience dehydration. Dehydration again points to the body losing a lot of water, so they tend to be dehydrated and frequently thirsty. And finally, they lack energy. As I mentioned, if you think about energy, energy comes from the glucose. If that energy is not used, if that energy is not produced by the mitochondria, individuals will lack energy and they will be fatigued. So you'll find that individuals that are diabetic show those basic symptoms. Guys, there are two types of diabetes if we broadly speak about that. Type 1 and type 2. What is the difference between these two? Let's unpack that. So the type 1 diabetes essentially is an inherited disorder, and it is a result of insulin producing cells in the body being destroyed. So we refer to type 1 as an inherited disorder where the immune system attacks and destroys the cells that make insulin. So it's often referred to as an autoimmune disorder, meaning that the body's immune system destroys the cells that produce insulin. That is inherited, and you don't have control over that. Okay? If we compare that to type 2 diabetes, this is when the body develops resistance to insulin, and this is I often refer to it as a lifestyle disorder. Because of choices in our diet, we consume diets high in carbohydrates and sugar, where the pancreas needs to constantly produce insulin to reduce the blood sugar levels. And in doing so, gradually builds up resistance. So I use this as an analogy of when you take a medication, say a paracetamol, and you constantly take that every day. At some point, when you do need to take that for a headache, it's not going to have the same effect because you've built up some form of resistance to it. And so that is essentially what we refer to as type 2 diabetes. We also know that the treatment of type 1 diabetes is slightly different. This is a lifelong disorder where an individual is affected for the rest of their life, and they require daily injections of insulin and a specially adapted diet. They need to constantly monitor their blood sugar levels and take insulin regularly to adapt their diets. However, when we compare that to type 2 diabetes, this is basically maintaining a balanced diet where individuals need to monitor their blood sugar levels, need to ensure that they choose foods that do not increase their blood sugar levels. They need to exercise regularly and use medication to control their blood sugar levels. And so we find that these two disorders are crucial to us understanding the difference. So let's look at what happens and what do we mean by. So under normal circumstances, guys, we find that insulin, which is indicated in this, allows for the glucose to enter the cells. However, in a person that has type 1 diabetes, we find that the insulin receptor becomes deactivated or destroyed, and hence they cannot activate the cells to take in the glucose, and hence there is no glucose entering the cells. If we compare that to type 2 diabetes, we find that due to a prolonged use of excessive amounts of insulin, that these cells become desensitized and are not effectively absorbing the insulin. And that is essentially the difference between the three types, where an individual has a normal physiology, type 1 being a condition that is as a result of an autoimmune condition which is inherited, and then type 2 being a disorder as a lifestyle decision or choice because of a diet or a lifestyle lacking in exercise where the blood sugar levels remain constantly high and produces and results in the pancreas constantly having to produce insulin. Guys, we've looked at diabetes as a disorder where the pancreas cannot produce or control the regulation of blood sugar levels. It's important that we now take a little break. When we get back, we will look at other nutritional disorders and spend some time looking at what nutritional information is. So have a little comfort break and I'll see you back in a little while.